Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting Doctor Strange and Wong for Marvel Zombies. First thing I did was give them all a spray with some matte white from Colourforge. I then used Contour Blue to paint the blue clothing on Doctor Strange. This was then given a wash with some Drakenhof Nightshade. While that wash dried, I used Deathweld Forest to paint all of Wong's clothing and his shoes. This was then given a wash with some Athonian Camo Shade. Once those washes had dried, I did a 50-50 mix of Contour Blue and Atolic Blue for the first highlight on Doctor Strange's clothing. This was followed by Atolic Blue just by itself. And for the final highlight, it was a 50-50 mix of Atolic Blue and matte white. I then painted his trousers with some Demonette hide. And this was given a wash with some Nuln Oil. While that wash dries, we'll go back to Wong and I'm going to relayer the Deathweld Forest with some Deathweld Forest. Make sure you avoid all of the recesses. I'll then do the first highlight, which is a 50-50 mix of Deathweld Forest and Elysian Green, with Elysian Green just by itself being the second and final highlight. Then we'll move back to Doctor Strange and we'll relayer the Demonette hide. After that, I'll use Mornfang Brown to paint the cummerbund that's around his waist. And I'll also use it to paint the straps around his feet. These areas will then get a wash with some Army Painter Soft Tone. While that dries, I'll start working on the yellow. Now, the normal Doctor Strange has yellow gloves, and he's also got a yellow strand coming from his cummerbund. And with Wong, we've got some yellow on his outfit, and of course, the little sort of bits of string that is keeping his outfit together. These yellow areas will then get washed with some Cassandora yellow. As that yellow dries, we'll relayer the Mornfang Brown. And the first highlight will be a 50-50 mix of Mornfang Brown and Scrag Brown, with the final highlight of Scrag Brown just by itself. For the yellow, we'll relayer the yellow with some Avalanche Sunset. Now, just for Doctor Strange, we're going to make that yellow a little bit brighter, so we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Avalanche Sunset and Flash Gets Yellow for the first set of highlights. And for the second set, it'll just be Flash Gets Yellow all by itself. For Wong, we'll do a 50-50 mix of Avalanche Sunset and Dawn Yellow. And for the second, it'll be Dawn Yellow just by itself. Then I'm going to start working on Doctor Strange's cloak, and for that, I'm going to use Mephiston Red. This will be given some wash with some Carroburg Crimson. And while that wash dries, we'll work on the white area that's on Doctor Strange's outfit. And the first thing I'm going to do is use some Grey Seer. Then a 50-50 mix of Grey Seer and matte white for the first highlight. And then matte white just by itself for the second. Once the cloak is dry, we're going to relayer the Mephiston Red, making sure we avoid all those recesses. This will be followed by the first highlight of a 50-50 mix of Mephiston Red and Evil Sunz Scarlet. Then Evil Sunz Scarlet just by itself. And for the final highlight, a 50-50 mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Wild Rider Red. I'm now going to start working on any skin, so for Doctor Strange, it'll be Bugman's Glow. For Wong, I'm going to use Cadian Flesh Tone. And for Zombie Strange and all the hands that are coming out of the portal, I'm going to be using Rakarth Flesh. All of these will then get a wash with some Reichland Flesh Shade. Once that wash is dried, we're going to use some Abaddon Black to mark in the eyes. We're going to do this on both Hero Doctor Strange and Wong. We're also going to use Abaddon Black to dot the leopard print markings that are on Doctor Strange's gloves. Continuing with the eyes, we're going to use some matte white, and then some Abaddon Black to mark in the pupils. Then we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Bugman's Glow for the first highlight on Doctor Strange's skin. Then for the next layer, we're going to use Cadian Flesh Tone. We're also going to relayer the Cadian Flesh Tone on Wong too. And this will be followed up by a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh for the final highlight. This is also for Doctor Strange. Zombie Strange will get highlighted with some Flayed One Flesh. And before I go any further, I'm going to do a tiny bit of Carroburg Crimson just around the eyes. And then I'll finish off the highlight with some Pallid Witch Flesh. Then I'm going to highlight Doctor Strange's tongue with some Screamer Pink, which will be highlighted with a 50-50 mix of Screamer Pink and Pink Horror. Next, I'm going to use Retributor Armor to start painting the gold on both Doctor Strange and Zombie Strange. This is the Eye of Agamotto and the little line that runs along his cloak. I'll also paint the symbol for the Sanctum Sanctorum on both Strange and Wong's bases. The gold will then get washed with some Reichland Flesh Shade. And while that wash dries, I'm going to use some Abaddon Black to paint the hair and the facial hair of Doctor Strange. This will then be highlighted with some Corvus Black. He has a little bit of white on his hair, so I'm going to use some matte white just to paint that in. And then I'm going to highlight the gold with a 50-50 mix of Retributor Armor and Uruk Armor Gold. I'll also paint the gem of the eye with some Warpstone Glow, highlighted with Moot Green. I'm then going to use Trollslayer Orange to paint the portal of Zombie Strange. And I'm going to do a little bit of object source lighting from the portal. So for that, I'm going to use Frugan Orange to just sort of highlight the areas where the light from the portal would touch. I'm not going to be too over dramatic with it. It's just going to be sort of a very light glow. I'll then use the Fugan Orange to give the portal a wash. While that dries, I'm going to use War Flesh to paint the tentacles on Hero Strange. And I'll wash these with some Athonian Camo Shade. Going back to the portal, I'm going to use a 50-50 mix of Trollslayer Orange and Fire Dragon Bright for the first set of highlights. I'm also going to highlight the object source lighting as well, making the light brighter the closer we get to the light source. Then I'll use Fire Dragon Bright to continue brightening up the portal as well as the object source lighting. And this will be followed by a 50-50 mix of Fire Dragon Bright and Matte White. With that out of the way, we're going to move back to the tentacles on Doctor Strange's base, and for that I'm going to use a 50-50 mix of War Green and Warboss Green for the first highlight. The second will be Warboss Green just by itself. And this will be followed by a 50-50 mix of Warboss Green and Skarsnik Green. Then I'll use Skarsnik Green for the sort of segmented sections that are underneath the tentacles. Now I can focus on the rest of the bases, so I'm going to use Dryad Bark to paint the mud areas on both Doctor Strange, and I'm also going to paint the wood on Wong's base. Then I'll use Dawnstone to start painting in the rocks on both Doctor Strange and Zombie Strange's base. I'm then going to use Gothor Brown to highlight the wood on Wong's base. And then I'll dry brush the Gothor Brown onto the brown of the Strangers. The rocky areas will then receive a dry brush with some Grey Seer. Then I'll use Abaddon Black to paint the rims, before using Agrax Earthshade on the wood on Wong's base, and some watered down Agrax Earthshade on both of the Doctor Strange's bases. Finally, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to. I'm going to add a little bit of Blood for the Blood God around the mouth of Doctor Strange, a little bit going down his front, and I'm going to add some to his hands. Once that's dry, that's those guys done. Really enjoyed painting these models. Come on, really do fantastic sort of sculpts, and the Marvel Zombies stuff is just as fun as the Zombicide stuff. As there's a little bit more detail on these guys, they took a little bit longer than they normally would for the rest of the models in the thing, so they took around about 6 hours to complete all 3. That said, I still had quite a lot of fun painting them. I really hope this guide helped you if you followed it, and if you did follow it and you did find it helpful, maybe give the video a thumbs up, me a subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.